Number 1. Harvey Weinstein. He was not an actor. He was the man who made actors. He was not a star. He was the man who created stars. For 30 years, he was, without question, the most powerful man in Hollywood. His name was Harvey Weinstein. He was the Kingmaker, the Oscar whisperer. He was a logistical genius and a brutal, terrifying bully, all rolled into one. His companies, Miramax, and later the Weinstein Company, were not just studios, they were Oscar factories. He did not just release films, he hunted awards. Pulp Fiction, Good Will Hunting, The English Patient, Shakespeare in Love. He was a legend. He was the man Meryl Streep once famously called God. On camera, at the Golden Globes and the Academy Awards, he was the loud, messy, passionate champion of independent film, the anti-Hollywood hero. He was the man who took small, difficult movies and turned them into Best Picture winners. He was untouchable. But behind the red carpets, behind the gold statues, behind the facade of art, Harvey Weinstein was living a secret, horrifying double life. It was, for decades, the most open secret in Hollywood. A story whispered in trailers, in agency backrooms, and at after-parties. Stories of bad meetings with Harvey. Stories of young, aspiring actresses who suddenly had their careers made or broken. Everyone knew. No one talked. Because Harvey Weinstein's power was absolute. He did not just finance movies, he financed careers. And he allegedly used that power as a weapon, a tool to lure, trap, and silence. For 30 years, he operated with total impunity. And then, the whispers became a roar. The story of his downfall begins not with a victim, but with a journalist, Ronan Farrow for The New Yorker, and Jodi Kantor and Megan Twohey for The New York Times. They were working on separate parallel investigations. They were not just chasing rumors, they were chasing a pattern. A pattern that would come to define one of the most monstrous criminal careers in modern history. His method, according to dozens of victims, was a script. A horrifying, repeating script. It would always start with the meeting. A young, ambitious actress would be invited to a luxury hotel, the Peninsula in Beverly Hills, the Savoy in London, to discuss a role. She would arrive excited, nervous, only to find the meeting was not in the lobby. It was in his private suite. The actress would enter, and Harvey would, allegedly, disappear, only to re-emerge moments later, wearing nothing but a bathrobe. This was the test. He would then, according to victims, allegedly ask for a massage, or he would offer her a massage. When the woman, confused and terrified, refused, the Kingmaker would allegedly become the predator. The stories were consistent: groping, forced acts, and in many cases, brutal, violent rape. This was his modus operandi. And after the assault came the real weapon, the threat. He would allegedly tell the woman, "I can make your career, or I can destroy it. No one will ever believe you. I am Harvey Weinstein." And for 30 years, he was right. He was protected by a wall of silence, a wall built by lawyers, by private investigators, and by publicists, and an industry that was making too much money to care. But in 2017, that wall was about to be obliterated. On October 5, 2017, the New York Times article hit. It was an explosion. It named names. It detailed settlements. It had actresses like Ashley Judd on the record. 5 days later, Ronan Farrow's article in The New Yorker hit. It was even more devastating. It had audio recordings. It had more victims. It had the word rape. The dam did not just break, it vanished. Gwyneth Paltrow, Angelina Jolie, Rose McGowan, one by one, the biggest stars in the world came forward. They all had a Harvey story. The king was now a leper. His company fired him, his wife left him. The Academy, the organization that he had built his life around, stripped him of his membership. But this was not just a cancellation. This was a criminal investigation. In May 2018, the unthinkable happened. Harvey Weinstein, the god of Hollywood, was photographed in handcuffs. His trial in New York in early 2020 was not about the famous actresses. The prosecution strategically built its case around two women the world did not know: a production assistant named Miriam Haley and an aspiring actress named Jessica Mann. The defense's strategy was brutal. They painted the women as liars, as opportunists. They showed the jury friendly emails the women had sent to Harvey after the alleged assaults. They argued that this was not rape. It was transactional sex. That these women had willingly slept with Harvey to advance their careers and were now just regretting it. The jury had to decide, was this a crime or was this just Hollywood? On February 24, 2020, the verdict came in. The courtroom was silent. Guilty of a first-degree criminal sexual act. Guilty of third-degree rape. The sound of the verdict was the sound of an entire era ending. At his sentencing, Harvey Weinstein, now frail and in a wheelchair, wept. He told the judge, "I'm not the man they say I am." The judge was not moved. He looked at the man who used his power to silence and abuse, and he sentenced him to 23 years in prison. It was not over. He was immediately extradited to Los Angeles to stand trial for more rapes. In 2023, he was found guilty again and sentenced to another 16 years. He will never be free. He will die in prison. Harvey Weinstein was the ultimate Oscar winner, a man who won awards for fictional stories while living a real-life horror film. He was the patient zero of the #MeToo movement, the monster whose downfall finally forced the world to listen.
Number 2, O.J. Simpson. In the 1970s and 80s, he was one of the most beloved men in America. He was not just an athlete, he was a god. The Juice, the man who had broken every record in football. But his fame went far beyond sports. He was an actor. He was the charming, funny, running through the airport guy in the Hertz commercials. He was the lovable, goofy cop Nordberg in the blockbuster Naked Gun movies. He was a movie star, a broadcaster, a national icon. He was the perfect, smiling, all-American hero. And then came 1994. The murders of his ex-wife, Nicole Brown Simpson, and her friend, Ron Goldman. The infamous white Bronco chase, the trial of the century. It was a case that divided America, a trial that was not about guilt or innocence, but about race, fame, and a single bloody glove. In 1995, the world stopped as the verdict was read. Not guilty. O.J. Simpson was a free man. He had, in the eyes of the law, beaten the system. He had faced attempted murder, and he had won. He was, once again, untouchable. But the world had changed. He was not guilty, but he was not innocent. He was a pariah, a social outcast. The hero was now a monster. He had lost his friends. He had lost his career. He was a man haunted by the ghosts of what he had gotten away with. For the next 13 years, he lived a bizarre, surreal life. He was a man tracked in his own infamy. He moved to Florida. He played golf. He signed autographs. He was a walking, talking, true crime exhibit. And he was angry. He was bitter. He believed the world owed him. He was obsessed with his stuff, the memorabilia, the trophies, the suits he wore during the trial, the things he believed the Goldman family had stolen from him after they won a $33 million civil suit against him. He was a man obsessed with his own past. And in 2007, that obsession would finally be his downfall. The story of his conviction begins in Las Vegas, a city of second chances and bad decisions. A sports memorabilia dealer named Bruce Fromming had a meeting. He was in a room at the Palace Station Hotel trying to sell a collection of O.J. Simpson memorabilia, trophies, signed footballs. He believed he was meeting a private collector. The private collector was a man who had set a trap. On the night of September 13, 2007, the hotel room door burst open, and in walked O.J. Simpson. But he was not alone. He was with an entourage, a group of 6 men, and they were armed. This was not a conversation. This was not a negotiation. This was a robbery. According to the victim's testimony, O.J. Simpson, the 60-year-old movie star, was in a rage. He was screaming, "This is all my bullshit. You stole this from me. Nobody leaves this room." His men pulled out their guns. They allegedly barked orders, "Bag it up, put it all in the boxes." For 6 terrifying minutes, O.J. and his armed crew ransacked the room. They stole thousands of items. They grabbed phones. They intimidated the victims. It was a full-blown armed takeover. They stuffed pillowcases full of memorabilia, and they walked out. O.J. Simpson had just committed armed robbery and kidnapping in the middle of a Las Vegas casino. He had made a fatal, catastrophic mistake. He thought he was O.J. Simpson, the man who gets away with it. He thought he was just taking back what was his. He had forgotten that in Las Vegas, everything is on camera. The hotel surveillance had him. The audio had him. One of his own men had secretly recorded the entire robbery. The audio was undeniable. It was O.J.'s voice, barking orders, admitting to the crime. This was not a bloody glove. This was not corrupt cops. This was not 1994. This was a slam dunk. When the police arrested him, he was reportedly arrogant. He told them, "I didn't do anything wrong. I was just getting my stuff." He did not understand, he could not understand that he was no longer the hero. The trial in 2008 was a spectacle, but this time it was a different kind of spectacle. It was pathetic. The prosecution simply played the tapes. They played the audio of O.J. screaming at the victims. They played the audio of him after the robbery laughing. They wouldn't know if we all had guns. His defense? That he didn't know his men had guns, that it wasn't a robbery, it was a sting operation. The jury did not buy it. On October 3, 2008, exactly 13 years to the day that he had been acquitted of murder, the new verdict came in. Guilty of kidnapping. Guilty of armed robbery. Guilty of assault with a deadly weapon. Guilty on all 12 counts. O.J. Simpson, the man who had been untouchable, just collapsed, his face a mask of pure, agonizing disbelief. At his sentencing, the judge was merciless. She did not just see a robbery, she saw everything. She saw the trial of the century. She saw the not guilty verdict. She saw the arrogance. She sentenced O.J. Simpson to 33 years in prison. It was a stunning, brutal, and, in the eyes of many, karmic sentence. He was not sentenced for the robbery in 2007. He was sentenced for the murders in 1994. He was sent to the Lovelock Correctional Center in the middle of the Nevada desert. He was no longer the Juice. He was no longer Nordberg. He was inmate number 1027820. He served 9 years, the mandatory minimum, and was released on parole in 2017. He died a free man, but his story is the ultimate Hollywood tragedy. A story of a man who had everything, fame, fortune, and an Oscar-level acquittal, but who was so consumed by his own arrogance, so obsessed with his own past, that he literally forced the system to lock him in a cage.
Number 3. Mel Gibson. For over 2 decades, he was the biggest movie star on Earth. Period. He was not just an actor. He was an icon, a hero. He was the charismatic, blue-eyed heartthrob who could do it all. He was the post-apocalyptic warrior, Mad Max. He was the lovable, unhinged cop, Martin Riggs in Lethal Weapon. He was the ultimate action star. But he was not just a star. He was an artist. In 1995, he directed and starred in Braveheart. It was not just a movie. It was a global cultural event, a masterpiece of epic filmmaking. And at the 1996 Academy Awards, Mel Gibson cemented his legacy. He was the king of Hollywood. He stood on the stage clutching 2 Oscars, one for Best Director and one for Best Picture. He was a beloved, family-friendly, universally adored icon. But behind the hero's smile, behind the charm, behind the Academy Awards, a different man was hiding. A man of deep, terrifying, and volcanic rage. And the world was about to see him. The perfect image began to crack. The first devastating explosion happened in 2006. He was pulled over for drunk driving in Malibu. But this was not a simple DUI. The police report detailed a horrifying anti-Semitic tirade. A vicious, hateful rant blaming the Jewish people for all the wars in the world. The world was stunned. The hero was a bigot? He apologized. He went to rehab. He blamed the alcohol. Hollywood, reluctantly, was willing to maybe forgive him. But it was not the alcohol. It was not a one-time mistake. It was his character. And the world was about to hear that character raw, unfiltered, and in a way that could never be denied. The story of his conviction begins in 2009. His decades-long marriage had ended, and he was now in a new, passionate, and highly public relationship with a Russian musician named Oksana Grigorieva. They had a child together. But the passion quickly soured into a toxic nightmare. In 2010, the relationship imploded. Oksana fled, filing for a restraining order, and she did not come empty-handed. She came with recordings. She had secretly recorded her phone conversations with Mel Gibson, and when those tapes were leaked to the press, they were not just embarrassing, they were criminal. The world, for the first time, heard the real Mel Gibson. The man on those tapes was not a hero. He was a monster. It was not just screaming. It was a series of the most terrifying, violent, and racist rants ever made public. He was heard, in his own voice, screaming at the mother of his child. He used racial slurs. He used vile, misogynistic language. But it was not just the words. It was the threats. He is heard telling her, "You look like a freaking pig in heat. If you get raped by a pack of N-words, it will be your fault." It was the voice of a man completely unhinged. But the tapes were also evidence of a specific, physical, criminal act. On the tapes, Oksana is heard, terrified, accusing him of a violent assault. What kind of a man punches a woman in the face twice while she's holding a baby? And Mel Gibson's response was not a denial. It was an admission. He is heard screaming back, "You know what? You freaking deserved it." The world was in a state of profound shock. This was not a rumor. This was not an allegation. This was an audio confession from an Oscar-winning icon to a brutal domestic assault. The Los Angeles County Sheriff's Department immediately launched a criminal investigation. This was no longer a celebrity gossip story. This was a domestic violence case. Mel Gibson, the star of Braveheart, the winner of 2 Academy Awards, was now facing a criminal battery charge. He was trapped. The entire world had heard the evidence. A trial would be a global humiliation. So, in March 2011, in a quiet, humbling courtroom, Mel Gibson did what all the other untouchables in this list eventually do. He took a plea deal. He pled no contest to 1 misdemeanor count of spousal battery. No contest is not innocent. In the eyes of the California legal system, it is a conviction. It is an admission that the government had enough evidence to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. He was a convicted domestic abuser. His sentence? He avoided jail, but just barely. He was sentenced to 3 years of probation. He was ordered to attend a 52-week domestic violence counseling program. But the real sentence was handed down by Hollywood. He was done. He became persona non grata, an outcast, the most toxic man in the industry. His agency dropped him. Studios refused to work with him. The hero was now a pariah. For nearly a decade, he was in the wilderness. Unlike many on this list, Mel Gibson's story has a final, complicated twist. A comeback. In 2016, he directed Hacksaw Ridge, a film that was nominated for 6 Academy Awards, including Best Director. Hollywood, it seemed, was willing to forgive. But his story is a chilling,
undeniable look at the rage that can hide behind a beloved public face. He is an Oscar winner. He is a genius director. He is a celebrated artist. And he is a convicted assaulter whose own terrifying voice remains the most damning evidence against him.
Number 4. Russell Crowe. He is, in many ways, the ultimate man's man of modern cinema. He is not a pretty boy. He is not a charming hero. He is a gladiator, an icon of raw, brooding, masculine intensity. His name is Russell Crowe. When he exploded onto the global scene, he was a force of nature. He was the vengeful, honorable warrior Maximus in Gladiator, a role that made him a superstar and won him the Academy Award for Best Actor. He was the troubled genius in A Beautiful Mind. He was the rugged, heroic captain in Master and Commander. His entire brand was built on intensity. He was known, famously, as the angry actor, the one who did not suffer fools, the one who demanded perfection. He was a brawler. He was notorious for his bar fights in Australia and London, for his confrontations with producers, for his absolute, seething disdain for the press. The world loved him for it. They saw it as passion. They saw it as artistic integrity. They saw it as the same honorable rage that his characters, like Maximus, used on screen. It was not a character flaw. It was his brand. But the problem with a brand built on rage is that, sooner or later, that rage stops being artistic and it becomes criminal. The world was about to find out what happens when the gladiator leaves the Colosseum and enters a New York City hotel lobby. The date was June 6, 2005. Russell Crowe was at the absolute peak of his power. He was in New York promoting his new film, Cinderella Man. He was staying at the ultra-exclusive, high-end Mercer Hotel in Soho. He was, by all accounts, frustrated. He was in his hotel room trying to make a simple phone call. He was trying to call his wife, Danielle Spencer, who was back home in Australia. The phone would not work. He tried to dial out. The call would not connect. He tried again and again. The simple modern convenience was failing him. And the intensity, the passion, the artistic temperament began to boil. A normal person might call the front desk. A normal person might use their cell phone. Russell Crowe was not a normal person. He was a man who saw the world as a series of confrontations. He stormed out of his room. He marched down to the lobby, his face, as one witness described it, like a thundercloud. He was not there to ask for help. He was there to demand a solution. He found the man at the front desk, the night concierge, a 28-year-old man named Nestor Estrada. Crowe did not ask, "Can you help me?" He yelled. He swore. He demanded to know why he could not make a simple call. Nestor Estrada, the concierge, tried to explain. He tried to calm the movie star down. He was, according to his testimony, respectful. He was just a man doing his job. And for Russell Crowe, that was not good enough. The gladiator lost control. In a fit of pure, unadulterated rage, he did not just yell. He did not just slam the counter. He grabbed the telephone, the heavy, plastic desktop phone, and with all of his gladiator intensity, he threw it directly at the concierge's head. The phone smashed into Nestor Estrada's face. This was not a movie. This was not a brawl with another tough guy in a bar. This was a sudden, violent, and unprovoked assault on an employee. Estrada crumpled, clutching his face. Blood began to pour. The phone had struck him just below his eye, opening a deep gash in his cheek. The hotel lobby was now a crime scene. The hotel staff, horrified, called 911. The police arrived, and they were not there to get an autograph. They saw the bleeding employee. They saw the security footage. They saw the weapon on the floor. And in the early hours of the morning, they did the unthinkable. They arrested Russell Crowe, the biggest movie star in the world. The image was a global shockwave. Russell Crowe, the Oscar winner, the hero, was perp-walked in handcuffs out of the Mercer Hotel. He was shoved into the back of a police car, his face a mask of shame and disbelief. The mugshot was devastating. He was charged not with a violation, not with a misdemeanor. He was charged with second-degree assault, a felony, and fourth-degree possession of a weapon. The weapon was the telephone. Under New York law, a felony assault with a weapon charge meant he was facing 7 years in prison. The passion was now a criminal case. The intensity was now a felony. The legal machine mobilized. Crowe, facing the very real possibility of a prison sentence that would destroy his career, did what all the other untouchables on this list do. He took a deal. He did not go to trial. He did not want a jury to see that videotape. In November 2005, he walked into a Manhattan courtroom. The felony assault with a weapon charge was gone. In its place, Crowe pleaded guilty to third-degree assault, a misdemeanor. He was a convicted assaulter, a man with a temper so violent, so out of control, that he could not be trusted with a telephone.
Number 5. Sean Penn. He is, without question, one of the most brilliant and electrifying actors of his generation. A true artist. His name is Sean Penn. He was never a movie star in the traditional sense. He was not a hero. He was not a heartthrob. He was the bad boy, the next De Niro, an actor of terrifying, volcanic intensity. The man who would later win 2 Academy Awards for his soul-shattering performances in Mystic River and Milk. He was and is a serious actor, a man who demands respect, who takes his craft with a life-or-death intensity. But in the 1980s, that intensity was not just on-screen. Off-screen, Sean Penn was a public menace, a walking, talking, ticking time bomb of pure, unfiltered rage. He was famous not just for his acting, but for his violent, uncontrollable temper. His number one enemy was the press, the paparazzi. He didn't just dislike them, he hunted them. He was arrested time and time again for assaulting photographers. He spat on them, he kicked them, he punched them. In 1985, he was arrested for attacking a British journalist with a rock. His entire life was a confrontation. And this rage was not just for the cameras, it was for his private life too. In 1985, he married the biggest pop star on earth, Madonna. Their marriage was not a romance, it was a firestorm. The tabloids called them the poison pens. The relationship was defined by his toxic jealousy, his paranoia, and, according to numerous reports, his violent physical assaults. He was a man completely and dangerously out of control. But the law was catching up. By 1987, Sean Penn was not just an angry actor. He was on probation. He had been convicted of 2 separate assaults on photographers. The judge, tired of his arrogance, had given him a suspended jail sentence. It was a final warning, a golden leash. The rules were simple. Stay out of trouble for 1 year. No more fights, no more assaults, or you go directly to jail. Sean Penn was incapable of following the rules. The story of his downfall begins on the set of his new movie Colors, a gritty, violent film about LA street gangs. Penn was the star, playing a tough, hot-headed cop. He was, as usual, in character. The date was June 1987. The film was shooting on location in Venice, California. It was a tense, difficult shoot. And Penn was on edge. On that day, a 34-year-old man named Jeffrey Klein was on set. He was not an actor. He was an extra, a background performer. He was allegedly also an aspiring musician and songwriter. And he made a fatal mistake. He saw the famous actor Sean Penn sitting alone between takes, and Klein thought it was his chance. He pulled out a small camera and he tried to steal a picture. What happened next was not a celebrity tantrum. It was not a warning. It was an assault. Sean Penn saw the flash, and the volcano erupted. According to the police report and court testimony, Penn did not call security. He did not tell the man to stop. He exploded. He allegedly stormed over to the terrified extra. He was screaming. He was swearing. He allegedly spat directly in the man's face. And then he attacked. He allegedly unleashed a furious 30-second barrage of punches. He hit Klein in the face. He hit him in the ribs. He didn't stop. He beat the man until he was on the ground. Other crew members had to physically pull the Oscar winner off of the bleeding extra. Jeffrey Klein was sent to the hospital. He had bruises. He had cuts. He was in shock. This was not a paparazzi on the street. This was an employee on his own film set. Sean Penn had just violently and publicly assaulted a man, and he was still on probation. This was the end of the line. He had broken the golden leash. He was arrested. He was charged with battery. But that wasn't the real problem. The real problem was the probation violation. He was dragged back into court in front of the same judge who had given him his final warning. Sean Penn, the artist, the genius, was trapped. There was no defense. He had been caught red-handed committing the exact crime he had promised he would not. He pled no contest to the assault. In the eyes of the law, a guilty plea. And on July 7th, 1987, the judge brought down the hammer. He was not impressed by his fame. He was not interested in his artistic temperament. He was disgusted by his arrogance. He revoked Sean Penn's probation, and he sentenced the 26-year-old movie star to 60 days in the Los Angeles County Jail. This was not a joke. This was not a slap on the wrist. This was real time. The bad boy was now an inmate. He was sent to a county jail in Castaic, California. He was placed in a high-security wing for his own protection. The experience changed him. He served 33 days of his 60-day sentence. The man who walked out was different. He was quieter. He was humbled. The heat had finally been cooled. His marriage to Madonna ended.
His days as the paparazzi-punching wild man were over. The jail sentence had worked. It had shocked the system of a man who thought he was untouchable. Sean Penn's story is a fascinating look at the nature of rage. He is a man who, to this day, is defined by his intensity. But he is now a two-time Oscar winner. He is a famed humanitarian, the man who personally went to Haiti after the earthquake, who went to New Orleans after Katrina. He is a walking contradiction, a man of deep, profound compassion for the world, and a man of deep, violent rage for the people who got too close. He is a genius, and he is a convicted criminal.
Number 6. Mark Wahlberg. He is one of the most bankable, beloved, and powerful stars in Hollywood, a true A-lister. His name is Mark Wahlberg. He is the ultimate everyman hero, the tough, working-class guy with a heart of gold. He's an Oscar-nominated serious actor for The Departed. He's a blockbuster action hero in Transformers. He's a hilarious comedy star in Ted. He's a super producer. He's a family man. He's a devout Catholic. Before all that, he was Marky Mark, the pop star rapper with the chiseled physique, dancing in his Calvin Klein underwear. He is a global icon of second chances, the ultimate local kid done good. But the past that he done good from is not a charming story of a mischievous kid. Before he was Marky Mark, before he was an Oscar nominee, Mark Wahlberg was, according to the Commonwealth of Massachusetts, a violent, convicted, racist criminal. His story is not one of a single mistake. It is a pattern, a terrifying pattern of hate crimes that culminated in a brutal assault that left a man permanently blind. And it is a story that he, as a rich and powerful celebrity, tried to have, legally, erased from history. The story begins in the 1980s on the streets of Dorchester, Boston, a tough, working-class, racially tense neighborhood. Mark was the youngest of 9 children, running wild without supervision. By age 13, he was addicted to cocaine. By 15, he was a documented racist. In 1986, the first major documented incident occurred. Wahlberg, then 15, and a group of his friends saw a group of black elementary school children, 4th graders. They were on a field trip. Wahlberg and his friends began to chase them. They did not just scare them, they chased them at them, throwing rocks. They screamed, "Kill the N-words." They chased the terrified children until an ambulance driver intervened. This was not kids being kids. This was a hate crime. The next day, Wahlberg and his friends went back. They found the same group of children at a local beach, and they attacked them again. They threw rocks. They yelled slurs. They, according to the report, incited a crowd of other white men to join in. The children were left traumatized. Wahlberg was not sent to jail. He was sued. The Attorney General filed a civil rights injunction against him. It was a formal legal order from the government. You are to stop assaulting, threatening, and intimidating people because of their race. He was 15 years old, and he was, legally, a hate criminal. A normal person would be terrified. A normal person would stop. Mark Wahlberg did not. 2 years later, April 1988, he was now 16 years old. He was, by his own admission, high on PCP. He was looking to score more drugs. He walked into a convenience store carrying a 5-foot-long wooden stick. He saw a middle-aged Vietnamese man named Thong Lam. Wahlberg, according to the police report, approached the man and without warning hit him over the head with the giant wooden stick. He hit him so hard that the stick broke. Thong Lam was knocked unconscious.
Wahlberg, holding his broken stick, grabbed a case of beer and fled the store, still screaming racial slurs. He ran down the street trying to escape. He saw another man, a man named Hoa Trinh, a Vietnamese refugee who had survived the war. He did not run past him. He saw him as an obstacle. He ran up to Hoa Trinh, and in a sudden, violent, unprovoked attack, he punched him as hard as he could directly in the face. The punch was so brutal that Hoa Trinh collapsed unconscious. Wahlberg was finally captured by police. He was in the back of the cruiser, and he was still ranting. He was bragging. He told the officers, according to the report, "You don't have to let him identify me. I'll tell you right now, that's the N-word whose head I cracked open." The consequences of that night were permanent. Thong Lam, the man hit with the stick, recovered. But Hoa Trinh, the man he had punched, was not so lucky. The punch had destroyed his eye. He was, and is to this day, permanently blind in his left eye. This was not a bar fight. This was not kids being kids. This was a 16-year-old who, in a single racist drug-fueled rampage, had permanently disabled an innocent man. Because of his extreme violence and his prior civil rights injunction, the state of Massachusetts did not charge him as a juvenile. They charged him as an adult. The charge? Attempted murder. Mark Wahlberg, the family man, the hero, was on trial for trying to kill a man. He was facing years in state prison. He, of course, took a plea deal. The attempted murder charge was dropped. He pled guilty to 2 counts of felony assault. He was a convicted felon. He was sentenced to 2 years in the Deer Island House of Correction. This was real. He was 17, he was an adult, he was an inmate. He served just 45 days. He got out, and this is where the story changed. His brother Donnie, of New Kids on the Block fame, pulled him out of the street life and put him into the music industry. Marky Mark and the Funky Bunch was born. His rebrand had begun. For decades, this story was just gossip, a rumor. But in 2014, Mark Wahlberg, now a global, Oscar-nominated, beloved icon, made a fateful mistake. He secretly petitioned the governor of Massachusetts to pardon him, to erase his 2008 felony convictions. He claimed he was a changed man, a devout Catholic, a philanthropist. He said the felony record was stopping him from expanding his Wahlburgers restaurant business. When the petition became public, the backlash was immense. The public, especially the Asian American community, was furious. They saw a rich white superstar using his power to literally erase a racist hate crime, a crime that had left a man blind forever. His victim, Hoa Trinh, was found. He was asked if he forgave Wahlberg. His response was devastating. He said he did forgive him, but that he should not be pardoned, that the crime was real, the consequence was permanent. Mark Wahlberg was shamed. He quietly dropped the pardon request. He is, to this day, a model citizen. He is a symbol of redemption. But he is also a convicted felon who, in a single night of racial hatred, stole a man's sight forever.
Number 7. Robert Downey Jr. Today, he is not just an actor. He is an industry. He's the anchor of the single biggest cinematic universe in history. He is Iron Man. He is, perhaps, the most beloved, charismatic, and highest-paid movie star on the planet, a symbol of wit, redemption, and impossible success. He is the ultimate bulletproof Hollywood hero, which makes it almost impossible to believe that in the late 1990s, Robert Downey Jr. was not a hero. He was a cautionary tale, a ghost, A man so consumed by his own demons, so hopelessly addicted that the world watched in real time as one of its most brilliant talents committed career suicide and was ultimately locked away in a state prison. His story is not just one of addiction. It is a story of crime, of a terrifying multi-year drug-fueled spiral that turned an Oscar-nominated genius into a convicted felon. The story of his downfall begins with his talent. He was not a star. He was a prodigy, an acting genius from birth. By 1992, at just 27 years old, he had done the impossible. He became Charlie Chaplin in a performance so breathtaking, he was nominated for an Academy Award. He had it all, the talent, the charm, the future. But he also had a secret, an addiction he had been battling since he was a child. And in the mid-1990s, that secret exploded. His life became a non-stop, chaotic police blotter. This was not a one-time mistake. It was a relentless pattern of self-destruction. It began in 1996. He was pulled over on Sunset Boulevard for speeding, but this was not a traffic ticket. When the police searched his Porsche, they found it all: cocaine, heroin, crack, and a .357 Magnum fully loaded hidden under his seat. He was an addict who was armed. He was arrested, charged with felony drug and weapons possession. The world was shocked. Chaplin was a cokehead? He was given a golden leash. He was a superstar. The judge did not send him to prison. He was given probation and ordered to rehab. A normal person would be terrified. A normal person would stop. Robert Downey Jr. was not normal. He was an addict. Just 3 weeks later, while out on bail, he did something so bizarre, so terrifying, it became the defining rock-bottom story in Hollywood history. He was, by his own admission, completely high. He wandered aimlessly through his upscale Malibu neighborhood. He found a neighbor's house. The door was open. He walked in. The family was home. They had no idea. He walked past them. He found their son's bedroom. He neatly folded up his own clothes, put them on a chair, and he climbed into the 11-year-old boy's bed and passed out. The mother found him, a strange, naked man, asleep in her child's bed. This was not partying. This was not rock and roll. This was terrifying. He was arrested again, this time for trespassing. The system still gave him a chance, and another, and another. For 3 solid years, the courts begged him to save himself. He was in and out of rehab a dozen times. He would be sent to a 90-day program, and he would walk out the back door after 3 days. He was ordered to take drug tests, and he would simply not show up. He was playing a game of chicken with the Los Angeles legal system. He was, in his own words, a loaded gun in his own mouth. And in 1999, the system finally pulled the trigger. He was dragged once again into a courtroom, this time in front of a new judge, Judge Lawrence Mira, a man who was famously not a fan of Hollywood. His high-powered lawyers gave the usual speech. He's an artist. He's sick. He needs help, not prison. Judge Mira had heard enough. He ordered the Oscar-nominated actor to stand, and delivered one of the most brutal, stunning, and honest sentencings in celebrity history. He looked at Downey and saw not a star, but a criminal. He read one by one every single chance Downey had been given, every rehab he had fled, every drug test he had failed. And he said, "I am not going to be the judge who, after you overdose, has to read that I was the one who let you go." He told him, "I am sentencing you to the time that you have imposed on yourself." And he brought down the hammer. 3 years in California State Prison. The courtroom exploded. Downey collapsed in his chair, weeping. It was a shockwave. This was not 30 days in a county jail. This was not a slap on the wrist. This was hard time. Robert Downey Jr., the most brilliant actor of his generation, was now a convicted felon. He was put in handcuffs and led out of the courtroom. He was sent to the California Substance Abuse Treatment and State Prison at Corcoran, the same prison that housed Charles Manson. He was no longer Robert Downey Jr. He was inmate number P500522. He was put in the general population. His job? He was paid 8 cents an hour to wash pots and pans in the prison kitchen. It was the ultimate fall of grace. The man who had it all was now, by his own hand, at the absolute bottom of the human experience. He served 1 year of his 3-year sentence. He was granted an early parole. He walked out of prison, and in a tragic final act of his disease, he relapsed. He was arrested twice more in 2000 and 2001. He was fired from his new TV show. He was officially uninsurable. He was done. But this is where the crime story becomes a redemption story. That last arrest, that final pathetic rock bottom, was the one that finally killed his demons. He is not playing a hero on screen. He is one. A man who went to war with himself and somehow came back. Number 8. Wesley Snipes. In the 1990s, he was the definition of cool. He was the ultimate action hero, a new kind of star. He was a martial arts master, a charismatic leading man, and a dramatic actor, all in one. His name was Wesley Snipes. He was the swaggering drug lord Nino Brown in New Jack City. He was the fast-talking hustler Sidney Dean in White Men's Can't Jump. He was the futuristic super cop in Demolition Man. And then he became Blade, the half-human, half-vampire daywalker. It was the role he was born to play. He was a superhero before superheroes were cool. The Blade franchise was a global, billion-dollar juggernaut. It was his franchise. Wesley Snipes was not just an actor. He was an A-list box office king. He was powerful, he was rich, and he was, in his own mind, completely untouchable. But while Wesley Snipes was on screen fighting fictional vampires, he was in real life waging a secret war against a far more powerful entity. An entity he could not possibly beat: the Internal Revenue Service, the IRS. The story of Wesley Snipes' downfall is not one of violence or drugs. It is a story of pure, unadulterated intellectual arrogance. A story of a multi-millionaire superstar who simply decided that he was not going to pay his taxes ever again. This was not a mistake. This was not bad accounting. According to the federal government, this was a deliberate, criminal conspiracy. The story begins in the late 90s at the absolute peak of his Blade fame. Snipes was earning millions upon millions, and he, like many, did not enjoy giving a large portion of it to the government. But unlike others, he found a new philosophy. He allegedly fell in with a group of tax protesters, a radical anti-government movement that preached a bizarre, pseudo-legal gospel. They were men who claimed that the IRS was a fraud, that the 16th Amendment, which created income tax, was never legally ratified, that paying federal taxes was in fact voluntary. They were in essence sovereign citizens for the wealthy, and they found their star pupil in Wesley Snipes. He was allegedly all in. From 1999 to 2004, a period where he earned more than $38 million, Wesley Snipes just stopped filing his tax returns. He didn't just not file, he allegedly sent the IRS letters, arrogant, bizarre letters claiming he was a non-resident alien of the United States, despite being born in Orlando, Florida. He claimed he was being persecuted. He claimed the IRS had no legal authority over him. He was literally poking the bear. But the fraud was even more brazen. He wasn't just not paying taxes. He was, according to the indictment, trying to get fraudulent refunds for taxes he had paid. In 1996, he paid $7.3 million in taxes. In 1997, he paid $4 million. Now, armed with his new philosophy, he allegedly filed amended returns, claiming he owed zero. He was asking the United States government to please send him a refund check for $12 million. It was a move of such staggering arrogance that it forced the IRS to act. This was not just a civil matter. This was a conspiracy. This was fraud. In 2006, the federal government dropped the hammer. Wesley Snipes, the daywalker, was indicted. He was charged with 6 felony counts of failing to file tax returns. He was charged with felony conspiracy to defraud the United States. He was charged with filing fraudulent refund claims. He was facing 16 years in federal prison. The Hollywood hero was now a federal defendant. His trial in 2008 was one of the strangest spectacles in celebrity legal history. Snipes' defense was not, "I'm sorry." It was not, "I made a mistake." His defense was, "I was the victim." He claimed he was just a simple creative artist, a painter. He claimed he had just hired these men for accounting advice and that they had tricked him, that they were the criminals and he was just an innocent, duped movie star. He was in effect telling the jury that he, Wesley Snipes, the powerful, intelligent, globe-trotting superstar, was just too stupid to know that you have to pay your taxes. The prosecution was not impressed. They pointed at the letters. They pointed at the fake refund claims. They pointed at the millions of dollars. The jury went to deliberate, and their verdict was a confusing split decision. They found him not guilty of the felony charges, not guilty of conspiracy, not guilty of fraud. They, in effect, believed that he was, just maybe, tricked by his advisors. It was a stunning victory. He was acquitted of the serious charges. But they did find him guilty on 3 misdemeanor counts of failing to file a tax return. It was a huge relief, a misdemeanor. He was not a felon. He was not a conspirator. He was just negligent. His lawyers were thrilled, facing at most a year per count. He was a first-time offender. He was a celebrity. He would get probation. He would pay a fine. He would walk. But they had forgotten about the judge. At the sentencing, U.S. District Judge William Terrell Hodges was furious. He did not see a victim. He saw an arrogant multimillionaire who had for years arrogantly and publicly flipped his middle finger at the entire American legal system. The judge decided to make an example. He looked at Wesley Snipes, And for those 3 simple misdemeanors, he sentenced him to the maximum possible time on each count. And he ordered them to be served consecutively. 1 year plus 1 year plus 1 year. Total, 3 years in federal prison. Wesley Snipes was stunned. His lawyers were stunned. The hero had been brought down by a misdemeanor. He fought it. For 2 long years, he appealed. He tried to stay free. He took his case all the way to the Supreme Court. They declined to hear it. In December 2010, the daywalker surrendered. He reported to the McKean Federal Correctional Institution in Pennsylvania. He was no longer Blade. He was inmate number 433-55018. He served 2.5 years. He was released in 2013, a humbled man. His A-list career? In ashes. His story is a chilling warning, a story of a man who had everything, but who was so seduced by a bizarre, arrogant, anti-government fantasy that he gambled his entire life and his freedom against the IRS. And the house always wins.
Number 9. Danny Trejo. He is, without question, the most recognizable tough guy in Hollywood history. His face is a warning, a roadmap of a hard life. The deep scars, the weathered skin, the long, drooping mustache, and the cold, unblinking eyes. He is the ultimate movie bad guy. His name is Danny Trejo. He is Machete. He is the tattooed, blade-wielding villain in Desperado. He is the terrifying Trejo in Heat. He has been in over 400 films, and in almost every single one, he is the same character. The hardened criminal, the cartel enforcer, the prison inmate, the man you never cross. His tough guy act is the most convincing, the most authentic, and the most terrifying in all of cinema. But what the world didn't know for decades is why he is so good at it, why he never seems to be acting. The reason is simple. It is not an act. The Danny Trejo we see on screen is the man he used to be. He is not a star who became a criminal. He is a hardened, convicted, violent criminal who, by an absolute miracle, became a star. His story is the reverse of everyone else on this list, and it is perhaps the most brutal of them all. His story begins in the 1940s in Los Angeles. He was not a child actor. He was a child addict. He did not grow up in a tough neighborhood. He grew up in a criminal one. His hero, his mentor, his idol, was his Uncle Gilbert, a man who was, by all accounts, a charismatic, successful, and deeply violent armed robber. Danny wanted to be just like him. He was not led astray. He was groomed. By age 8, he was acting as a lookout. By age 10, he was given his first job. By age 12, his uncle had him addicted to heroin. His childhood was over. His criminal career had begun. He was in and out of juvenile hall, or juvie. So many times the guards knew him by name. It was a revolving door. Juvie, a few months on the street, armed robbery, drugs, juvie again. He graduated from juvenile hall to the county jail. And from the county jail, he finally made it to the big leagues. San Quentin, Folsom, Soledad. He was now an inmate in the 3 most famously brutal, violent, and dangerous prisons in the United States. And this is where the actor we see on screen was born. In San Quentin, Danny Trejo was not a victim. He was a survivor. He was tough, he was smart, and he was a fighter. He became a champion boxer. He was the lightweight and welterweight boxing champion of both San Quentin and Folsom. He was an enforcer. He worked for a prison drug ring. He was the man they sent when someone needed to be convinced. He was, in his own words, living the life. He had finally arrived. He was in the big leagues of American crime. But his worst, most violent act was still to come. The date was May 5th, 1968, Cinco de Mayo. Inside Soledad State Prison, tensions were at a breaking point. A riot exploded in the prison yard. It was pure, violent, bloody chaos. Trejo was in the middle of it. In the confusion, a prison guard was struck in the head with a rock. He went down badly injured. When the riot was quelled, the guards rounded up the problems, and Danny Trejo was problem number 1. He was identified as the man who threw the rock. This was not a robbery charge. This was not a drug charge. This was attempted murder of a prison guard. In the California prison system in 1968, this charge meant one thing, and one thing only: the gas chamber. He was 24 years old, and he was facing execution. He was thrown in the hole, solitary confinement, to await his trial and his death. And it was there, in that dark, concrete box, that the miracle happened. He was alone. He was terrified. He was at the absolute final rock bottom. He made a deal, not with the warden, but with God. He said, "God, if you're there, let me die with dignity. Just let me die with dignity, and I will say your name every day, and I will do whatever I can for my fellow man." He waited for his trial. The trial was a sham. The prison guards brought in their witnesses, other inmates, to point the finger at Trejo. But they had forgotten about the prison code. The first witness was called. "Did you see who threw the rock?" The inmate: "No, I was under a table." The second witness: "Did you see who threw it?" The inmate: "No, I was running the other way." No one saw anything. The case, in a stunning, almost unbelievable turn of events, was dropped. There were no reliable witnesses. Danny Trejo had been saved. He had stared death in the face, and death had blinked. He was paroled from prison in 1969, and he kept his promise. He got clean, he never touched heroin again, and he dedicated his new life to his fellow man. He became a drug counselor. For 15 years, he was just a counselor. He was working, he was clean, he was happy. And then Hollywood called. In 1985, a young recovering addict that Trejo was sponsoring called him terrified. He was on a movie set and he was surrounded by cocaine. He was going to relapse. Trejo jumped in his car and drove to the set. He wasn't there to be in the movie. He was there to save a life. He walked onto the set of the film Runaway Train, a rough, tattooed ex-con looking for his kid. And a man across the set recognized him. That man was Edward Bunker, a successful, tough guy screenwriter and a former inmate, an ex-con who had served time in San Quentin with Danny Trejo. Bunker looked at Trejo and he looked at the script and he asked him the question that would change his life. "Danny, can you act like an inmate?" Trejo just laughed. He told him, "I've been in every penitentiary in California. I'll give it a shot. He was hired as an extra, and the director, seeing his face, his authenticity, immediately upgraded him, gave him a speaking role. Danny Trejo, the convicted armed robber, the prison boxing champion, the man who had faced the gas chamber, was now a movie star. His story is the ultimate Hollywood redemption. He is a man who was not acting, he was just being himself, and he turned a lifetime of crime into a lifetime of art and service.
Number 10. Lori Loughlin. She was not just an actress. She was America's mom. For a generation, she was Aunt Becky on Full House, the perfect, warm, impossibly kind, and wholesome matriarch of the nation's most beloved TV family. Her career was a monument to clean. She was the star of the Hallmark Channel, the queen of the feel-good Christmas movie. Her real life seemed to be just as perfect. She was married to a fashion icon, the designer Massimo Giannulli. They were rich beyond belief. They lived in a sprawling Bel Air mansion. They had two beautiful social media famous daughters, Olivia Jade and Isabella. She was, in every sense, the living embodiment of having it all. A perfect career, a perfect husband, a perfect family, and a perfect, spotless reputation. But behind that billion-dollar smile, behind the perfect Hallmark facade, Aunt Becky was committing a federal crime. A crime born not from desperation, not from addiction, and not from rage, but from the one thing that defines modern Hollywood more than anything else: privilege. The story of her downfall is not just about her. It is about a secret, nationwide conspiracy, a conspiracy that would expose the dark, rotten core of the American college admission system. It was called Operation Varsity Blues. For years, a man named Rick Singer was the secret weapon for the 1%. He was a college counselor, but he didn't just help with applications. He offered a side door, a guaranteed illegal back channel into the most elite universities in the country: Yale, Stanford, Georgetown, USC. And in 2019, the FBI finally found that door. They had been investigating a completely separate financial crime when they stumbled onto Rick Singer. They flipped him. They put a wire on him, and for months he recorded his conversations with his rich, famous, and powerful clients. And his most famous clients were Lori Loughlin and his husband, Massimo Giannulli. The case was not a misunderstanding. It was not a mistake. It was a cold, calculated, multi-year fraud. Here's the con. Lori and Massimo's daughters were not academically USC material, but they desperately wanted the status of a USC education. So they hired Rick Singer. And Singer presented the side door. The plan? He would get the girls into USC as fake athletes. He would present them to the University of Southern California as elite, championship-level crew athletes, rowers. There was just one problem. Lori Loughlin's daughters had never rowed crew. They were not athletes. They were Instagram influencers. So Rick Singer told them they needed proof. They needed pictures. And this is where the wholesome family became criminal co-conspirators. According to the federal indictment, Lori and Massimo took their two daughters and staged a fake athletic photo shoot. They had their daughters pose in workout gear on an ergometer, a rowing machine, pretending to be athletes. They then emailed these fake staged action shots
to Rick Singer, who used them to build a fake athletic profile. The profile claimed the girls were gold medal winners, that they were highly recruited champions. It was a complete and total lie. The final step? The payment. In exchange for this service, Lori Loughlin and Massimo Giannulli agreed to pay Rick Singer $500,000. $500,000. But they didn't just write a check. They allegedly funneled the money through Singer's fake charity, the Key Worldwide Foundation. They were committing wire fraud and tax fraud at the same time. It was the perfect crime. But they had forgotten about the FBI. The feds had it all. They had the bank transfers, they had the emails, they had the pictures of the girls on the rowing machines, and, most damningly, they had Rick Singer's recorded phone calls. They had Lori Loughlin on tape, discussing the cover story, discussing how to hide the payments from the IRS. They had her, cold. On March 12, 2019, the world exploded. The FBI announced Operation Varsity Blues. They had arrested 50 people, including CEOs, billionaires, and 2 famous actresses. One was Felicity Huffman. The other was Aunt Becky. Lori Loughlin was arrested by the FBI. The image of America's perfect mom being charged as a federal criminal was a shockwave. Felicity Huffman, the other actress, saw the evidence and immediately pled guilty. She was ashamed. She served 11 days. Lori Loughlin did the opposite. She was arrogant. She was defiant. She pled not guilty. She and her husband decided they were going to fight the United States government. Their defense? That they were confused, that they believed their $500,000 was a legitimate donation. They claimed they were the victims, that Rick Singer had conned them. It was a fatal, catastrophic mistake. The prosecutors were furious. This not guilty plea was a slap in the face, so they hit back. They returned to the grand jury and they filed new, more serious charges. Conspiracy to commit money laundering, conspiracy to commit federal programs bribery. Lori Loughlin was no longer facing a slap in the wrist. She was now facing a mandatory minimum of decades in federal prison. She had gambled, and she had lost. For an entire year, she and her husband spent millions on lawyers, desperately trying to find a way out. They tried to have the evidence thrown out. They tried to claim the tapes were entrapment. The judge rejected every motion. The trial was set. They were trapped. A jury was about to see the photos. They were about to hear her voice on the tapes. On May 22, 2020, after a full year of defiant arrogance, Aunt Becky finally surrendered. Lori Loughlin and Massimo Giannulli withdrew their not guilty plea and pled guilty. At her sentencing, the wholesome mask was gone. She wept in front of the judge. She called herself awestruck by the awful decision she had made. The judge was not impressed. He sentenced Lori Loughlin to 2 months in federal prison. He sentenced her husband, who the judge believed was the more active participant, to 5 months. America's mom was now inmate number 77827-112. She served her time. She was released. But her reputation was destroyed. Her story is the ultimate toxic fairy tale of modern fame. A story of a woman who had everything, a perfect life, a perfect family, millions of dollars, but who was so obsessed with the status of an elite college logo that she was willing to steal, to lie, and to commit a federal crime, all to get the one small, final thing that she had not earned.